Good afternoon. I'm John Walters, Chief Operating Officer of Hudson Institute. On behalf of our president, Ken Weinstein, and my colleagues, I'd like to welcome you to the Betsy and Wally Stern Conference Center. Hudson has had a long history of working on human rights, and one of the people most responsible for that work is Nina Shea, who is chairing today's session. I want to thank her for her work. I want to thank our panelists for their courage. And I want to mention that Nina and her colleagues at the Center for Religious Freedom have been doing this for a number of years and telling the stories that need to be told and bringing to greater attention the suffering that we all need to pay attention to and act to reverse. So I want to thank her for her work and dedication, and without further ado, I'll let her take over the panel. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you all for coming, especially at such short notice. And it is a real privilege and honor for me to be introducing this panel today. We have our old friend Emmanuel Ogabe, who is a human rights lawyer and counsel for the Jubilee campaign. He has been on this podium before, just in November. He brought another survivor of a Boko Haram attack, Adamu Habila, to Washington to tell about his ordeal. That man was shot in the head after refusing to deny his faith, and he lived and survived and came here and brought the x-rays. And if you want to look on our video stream or our website, the video of his testimony is there. And today we're also extremely honored to have Deborah Peter, who I am sure is Hudson's youngest speaker ever. She is 15 years old. She is from northern Nigeria. Her family roots are in Chibok, the very town where the 300 some girls were abducted and enslaved. She is the sole survivor of her household of a Boko Haram attack, which she will tell you about today. It's a terrible story, but it's an extremely important one for Americans to hear. And she is doing it, and it's a very painful story for her to tell. She's doing it because there are 300 girls her age who are suffering today in Nigeria. Please join me in giving them both a very, very warm, encouraging welcome. Deborah, can you start by telling us what happened on the night of December 22nd, 2011, and where you were? Just bring it closer, yeah.
Okay. On December 22nd, 2011, at 7 p.m., so me and my brother were at home. We started hearing a gun shooting. So my brother called my dad and told him not to come back home because they're fighting. And my father told him that just forget about it because this is not the first time he's coming home while people are fighting. So he'll come back home. So he told us that he's hot. He wants to take a shower. So he went to the bathroom to take a shower. At 7:30, 3 men knocked on our door, and then my brother opened the door for them, and they asked him, "Where is your dad?" He now told them that my dad is in the bathroom taking a shower. So they waited on my dad about 3 minutes. So they go ahead and drag him out of the bathroom. They said he's wasting their time because they don't have any other time to wait for him. So when they take him out of the bathroom, they told him that he should deny his faith. He now told them that he can't deny his faith. So they told him that they're going to kill him if he didn't deny his faith. But he told them that he should rather die than to go to hellfire. So he now told them that God said anyone that denied him, he's going to deny him too in the presence of his dad in heaven. So my dad refused to deny his faith, and then they shoot him 3 times in his chest. So my brother was in shock, and he now said, "What did my dad do to you? Why did you kill him?" So they told him to be quiet, if not they're going to shoot him too. So there were 3 Boko Harams that came in that night. So they when my brother kept quiet, so the first, there were three. One is the leader. One is like the person close to the leader, like second to the leader, and the other one is just a servant. So the servant now told them that they should kill my brother, but the one close to the leader told them no, they should not kill him because he's too young. And then the leader told them that the first guy has a point, that if my brother stay, he would grow up and become a pastor like my dad. So the leader told them to kill him too. So they go ahead and shoot him twice in his chest. So he fall. When he fall, he started like moving. So they go ahead and shoot him again, one in his mouth, and then he fall down and died. So I was in shock. I didn't know what was happening. So so they put me in the middle of my dad and my brother. So the next day, the army came and picked them to the mortuary and take me to hospital.
Deborah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's not easy to talk about. Can you tell us why they singled out your family? Why did these men, and who were these men? Did you know them? And why did they come to your house? Why your house?
I know one of them, and the other one is living close to our house, but I don't really know his name and stuff because I don't go close to the Muslim kids and the Muslim people. And then the reason why they came to our house because my dad was a pastor, and they warned him so we should. And my dad refused, so they go ahead and come to him and kill him. Because on November, they burned his church, but still, he didn't give up and build the church again. So they said, okay, they're gonna kill him. So they came to our house and killed him.
So your father was a Christian pastor,
Yeah.
and he had a church, and that was burned down the month before. So Boko Haram is closing in on the area, and this area is in northeastern, in Borno State, where
Yeah.
Chibok is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your family's connection to Chibok,
Yeah, my dad and my mom are from Chibok.
and you came to the United States with to come to a summer camp
Yeah.
that was Emmanuel, I know, helped you and bring you here, and it was a 9/11 foundation camp to help children of terrorism, as I understand it. And you have not talked about your story before, and this is the first time this week that you're starting to talk about it. Why is that? Why are you coming here and talking about it now?
Because I want to help the other kids, and I want to help people from what is happening in Nigeria. So they told me that I should help them. So I'm willing to help them.
And what are you hoping that will come of your talks? What do you hope will happen?
I hope if people hear my story, I think they will understand and they will know more and more of what God said, and they will like understand what it means to stand strong and courageous.
Thank you very, very much. And I'm just, we're learning now in the papers that these girls were, at least 100 of them or more, have been forcibly converted, that they were Christian. Is that your understanding, knowing Chibok, is that would there be Christians in Chibok?
Yeah, Chibok is a like small group of people, and there's a lot of Christians there. Most of them are Christian, and they're related to each other. So they don't normally fight like that. So it's the Boko Haram that is.
Yeah, I don't know if you're aware, but the U.S. government finally designated Nigeria as Boko Haram as a terrorist organization in last November. And before that, the State Department had been saying that the Boko Haram had nothing to do with religion. This was Assistant Secretary for Africa, Johnny Carson, was saying after, I remember I was dumbfounded, it was after an attack on another church in 2012, and he gave a speech before CSIS think tank in town here saying that it had nothing to do with religion. So thank you so much. Emmanuel, do you want to take over? Emmanuel just returned from Nigeria on Friday. He'd been there in the Northeast and in Cameroon for 3 weeks, collecting stories from Boko Haram victims.
Yes, thank you very much, Nina, for having me, and thank you very much, everyone, for turning up to this lunchtime event where we're not serving lunch. Now, we've seen the headlines, and we thought it would be a good idea to drill down a little and put a face to the reality of the atrocities that are going on in Nigeria. And this is important because we've faced a major wall of denial, not from the Soviets or the traditional establishment, but from the State Department. Deborah's story is one that we've known for a couple of years since we found her during a fact-finding mission. And I should point out that she was denied a visa twice by the US government. And the reason she was denied a visa was they said to her, you can't make this stuff up. They said to her, you don't have family ties. And so they essentially re-traumatized a girl whose family was exterminated by terrorists just because she wanted to come to America for a terror survivors camp. Now, the good thing about Deborah's story is that it's a story of what is good about America. A foundation of 9/11 victims, the children of people who died in 9/11, decided to have a camp for other child victims around the world. And it was that program that we got Deborah enrolled in, and we brought her to the States. And when she was heading back to Nigeria, some really decent folks said, you know what, let's find her a school here so she can go to school. And that's how Deborah ended up in this part of the country. Now, we tactically decided not to put her in the public space because she was very fragile. She still has nightmares and all of that. And so even though we were facing an administration that was denying the religious genocide going on against Christians in Nigeria, we felt that we couldn't sacrifice the mental health of this young child just to get one up over the administration. That changed a couple of weeks ago when the terrorists went to Deborah's village and abducted about 300 girls, literally people she's played with. Her mom graduated from that school. And, in a normal world, maybe she would have gone to that school. And so we reached out to Deborah and we said, look, do you want to speak up and put a face to this travesty? And she was kind enough to say, yes, I will do that. And so this brings us to this point where we are now. Let me maybe give you a bit of context of what Boko Haram has been doing. Boko Haram are gentlemen terrorists. And I say that obviously tongue-in-cheek. The point is Boko Haram says we don't kill the elderly, we don't kill the young, and we don't kill women. Those are the three exceptions they have. The Christians, the Jews, and Muslim apostates, they don't count. We'll kill them. And so her story from a couple of years ago is classic. They came in, they killed the pastor, and then they made a calculation that his son, who was an exception to the targets, should be killed because he might grow up and become a pastor. This was an example of Boko Haram shifting the goalposts of those that it would not kill. Now, what has happened from all of the fact-finding missions we've conducted was the Christian response to this genocide was they would move the men out and leave the women behind. And so we found that there were many camps of Christian men who left town and left the women behind because Boko Haram said, we don't kill women, we don't attack women. That changed last month. Boko Haram realized, we've killed all the men or we're running out of town, we're going out of the terrorism business. We've got to come up with a new game plan. And the next thing we have 300 young women, almost 300 young women abducted, taken to this camp, and they have become slave brides. And so we illustrate this to say that Deborah dodged a bullet 2 years ago when Boko Haram was still operating on that rules of engagement. But now the story has changed. If she were in Nigeria, if she was in Chibok on that day, they wouldn't have done the gentlemanly thing of tying her up between the corpses of her brother and her dad and leaving her overnight. And this is how this resident evil is evolving. And so I want to maybe quickly just share a few of the trends that we noticed from this recent trip to Nigeria. The first one I've just shared is obviously the gender-based targeting of women now that they have essentially decimated the male population of many parts of northeastern Nigeria. The other trend that I would, of course, want to mention is the fact that Boko Haram is becoming tactically more superior than the security forces on ground. We've noticed the armaments they bring in are way more sophisticated than what the Nigerian government has. But in response to the global outcry over the abduction of the girls, we've seen media reports saying, oh, America is sending assistance, the French are sending assistance, the Brits are coming in, and so on and so forth. And what happened last week while we were out there was that Boko Haram blew up bridges. Now, this is a group that is taking preemptive strike action way before US drones, way before French forces or anyone comes in. And that shows you how resilient and how deadly they are. I do want to mention another concern that we noted. I don't know whether to call it a trend, but the humanitarian impact of the crisis is such that we're seeing population displacements from Nigeria into Niger, into Chad, into Cameroon. Now, for a long time, we were seeing IDP displacements within the country. But we're now seeing entire villages. I was at a refugee camp last week in Cameroon, and a pastor explained to me how the entire village just woke up at night and everyone just marched en masse across the border because Boko Haram had retreated from the capital where the military was engaging them to the rural areas, and they were killing people in their homes and looting their property. And so this mass population displacements has been going on for almost a year. But what is particularly disturbing is that last week while we were in Cameroon, Boko Haram struck a village, killed close to 300 people, and then there was a population displacement and 3,000 people fled again across the borders. So we have this going on consistently for a year, and you begin to wonder, where's the humanitarian response to this crisis? Let me mention two things that concerned me. One of them was at the UN refugee camp we visited, we noticed that they were distributing grains to the people who had fled there from Nigeria. And then when we interviewed them, they said to us, this is the first time that we've been giving food in 49 days. Now, this is the people at the official UN camp. They've not been fed for 49 days. There are other unofficial camps. You can only imagine how bad the conditions are there. And so we have a situation where there's an ineffective military response to terrorism. then there's an ineffective humanitarian response to the victims of the terrorism. And we're at a point now where the international community needs to respond effectively to what is going on in Nigeria. Maybe I should also add at this point that one of the trends of Boko Haram attacks that we're seeing, the one I referred to earlier about the gender victimization of women, we have actually, Jubilee Campaign, the group that I'm affiliated with, has actually encountered a couple of escaped slave brides. And the stories that they narrate are chilling and harrowing. On one of our trips in September, we literally were told the terrorists are striking right now. They're burning 3 churches. You've got to turn back. You've got to turn back. And so we asked, what happened? Why are they striking just right now? Oh, there was a girl the terrorists captured. She escaped from the camp, and they're looking for her. And so we suddenly became unexpected, mild-mannered superheroes, because we realized that the only thing for us to do was to get her out of there. And so we got her out of there. And some of you may have seen her on CBS News yesterday. I think she's the only escaped child bride to give an interview. But we were able to move her out of that location. And initially we thought this is, maybe this is a one-off thing. But we now realize that this is part of the systematic agenda of Boko Haram to attack women, because most of the men are gone. I will say in a nutshell about some of the atrocities that these girls have shared with us is that Boko Haram takes you back to the camp. And I'll speak specifically to Hajara's case, because that was on CBS News yesterday. So I don't think I'm doing very much harm if I go into more details about what happened to her. But in the camp that she was taken to in the mountains of Nigeria and Cameroon, every day for a week, she was asked to renounce her faith or die. And she refused. On the 7th day, one of the terrorists who was related to her came up to her and said to her, you know, Hajara, you know, today is the final day they're going to slit your throat. I'm going to ask you to do yourself a favor. Just accept Islam and spare your life, even if you don't believe it. And so when they came on that 7th day, Hajara accepted Islam. And so they put her in the burqa, just like the girls in the TV, and she was assigned to be the wife of one of the terrorists, the lead terrorist. However, and this is an interesting phenomenon, they said, listen, she's an infidel, so she needs to go through a purification process before she can become good enough to be the bride of the head terrorist. And so they forbore from, sexually molesting her. And so they designated her on a 90-day purification plan. And so the good thing is she played along with them. She studied the Quran. She was trained in arms and so on and so forth. But she realized that her window of opportunity was slipping. So close to the 90-day, the end of the 90-day grace period, she feigned illness. And so they got worried, what are we going to do? This is a problem. All right, let's send her somewhere to go get treatment. Now, they would not have cared about her life if she had remained a Christian. But now, because she had played along for 90 days, she had carried ammunition for them when they went on attacks and so on and so forth, she was now one of the boys. And so they let her go out for treatment with an older Muslim woman as her chaperone. And when they got to the town, that was when Hajara escaped. And we were able to get her and whisk her out of there. So there's a little more of Hajara's story that is very disturbing. Some of it is online. We were very disappointed that a journalist from Reuters went to Nigeria, met her, took her photograph, and splashed it on the internet and gave her name. Oh, girl escaped from camp. It was so revolting. And so what we did was we had to relocate her again within the country. And this is why, these are some of the sensitivities why we don't always bring victims out, because some people don't have the intelligent discretion to realize that you can put this young lady at risk. And so this was a snapshot of one of the, this was actually the earliest slave bride that we encountered. And since then, in the last 8 months, we've encountered about 5. And this is the first time that we are seeing huge numbers. We're talking hundreds have been abducted. Let me...
Can I ask you a question, Emmanuel? This seems to be the Chibok incident seems to be an escalation for Boko Haram. I mean, there have been these abductions in the past that you're describing, but to take 300 girls all at once, what is going on? Why are they escalating? How are they escalating? And finally, what are you recommending that the West or Nigeria do about it? What can be done about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, clearly they're escalating, and because they're a resilient group, what has happened is traditionally they've attacked churches consistently on Sundays. And so when the military deploys to protect churches, they switch it around and they go and attack schools. Now, what we noticed was in the last couple of years, they would attack empty schools. So no one felt the need to protect schools that were inhabited. And then now they're attacking inhabited schools and killing kids while they're there. So the terror group is way more resilient than the State Department is in their analysis of the problem, or the Nigerian military is in their response to the problem. And I wrote an article while I was out in Nigeria about the abduction of the girls, and I think I asked that it should be circulated to you all. I don't know if it was done. But my point there was the terrorists are energized by the media attention they're getting. That is not to say we shouldn't report it, but I said that they've done so many horrible things and no one noticed them. And finally, they picked up the girls and everyone is watching them. And I said, they're going to strike again and they're going to go for more girls. Barely 48 hours after I wrote that article, they struck again and they took 8 more girls. So this is, unfortunately, this is a make or break time for Boko Haram. If the world cannot unite and snuff them out now, they now know what will get our attention. And they're going to keep, putting it in our faces going forward. As far as recommendations go, I think the first step is for the State Department in the US to stop waffling over the core theological basis of this group. This is not an economic rebel movement. I read a newspaper article that said they're rebels. These are not rebels, they're anarchists, they're jihadists. And when you frame it in the right context, when you have a right problem statement, then you can have an appropriate response to that. The cure for, you can't call it flu if it's Ebola. They don't have the same responses. We do not have a cure for Ebola, and we do not have a cure for extreme fanatical Islamism. And so containment, not appeasement is the solution. I want to make one key point so we understand how crazy these guys are. In the first place, they want an Islamist theocracy over northern Nigeria. You cannot achieve that in a country where the population is 50% Christian. We are talking about, massive genocide to be able to achieve that. Now, here's the thing. In northern Nigeria, where they're insisting and demanding for Sharia law, guess what? There is Sharia law. While we were in Nigeria, a guy was sentenced to death by stoning for rape. So there is Sharia law, but they want a very extreme version this Taliban style. This is why they were originally called the Nigerian Taliban. They want to be able to have public beheadings in a stadium where people can gather, and this is a medieval sect. This is the sort of thing they want. So they don't like the current Sharia process where you go into a court and you have trials and all of that. That's too slow and boring. They want to do it the old-fashioned way. These are the kind of savages that we're dealing with. And I will maybe wrap up on this point by saying, this is a threat of existential proportions to the inchoate democratic and governance structures in Africa. Now, when 9/11 occurred here in the United States, it was an inconvenience to some of our constitutional rights like privacy and, TSA was a nuisance. But in Africa, it's a whole different ballgame because it's a threat to the legal system, to the rule of law, and to democracy. And so Dr. King says it well that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And this is why this should be of grave concern to all of us.
Great, thank you very much. I think we have time for a few questions if anyone would like to ask a question. Yes, sir. And please identify yourself too.
Sure. Hi, my name's
and just wait 1 second for the microphone. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Scott Thuman from ABC 7 News. Thank you so much for doing this. And I'm just kind of curious, Deborah, as we talk about Boko Haram and how much it affects the community, the neighborhoods, the villages, was this something that you always feared? Is there a day that you go through life without worrying about Boko Haram? For us who don't necessarily understand, what is it like to be in an area where they're so dominant?
Yeah, because we moved from one place to another because they always disturb my father and they always told him that they're going to come attack him one day. So my dad always moved, but they keep following him and stuff. So, yeah.
And then you said, you were telling me earlier, Deborah, that you got some help to move out of that region into the capital from another pastor. And what happened to that pastor?
He was killed too by Boko Haram on
It was May 15th last year. The pastor who paid for her to get out of town, and this very pastor who actually introduced me to her, Boko Haram came to his home May last year and killed him in front of his kids. Yeah.
So, just hearing these stories, you get the sense that Boko Haram is encircling these areas and going and targeting them pretty sporadically, but over consistently in a way. So it's not systematic, but over time, a lot of people are being affected.
Well, I mean, they have had differences of strategy. In Yobe State, they were very systematic. They would go out and mark the homes of Christians with graffiti, come back at night and kill off the Christian males. And that was how Adamu, his entire neighborhood, all the males were killed in one night. He was the only survivor. And most of the wounds we see on male Christians from northern Nigeria are serious trauma to the head because they shoot to kill, and most times it's at point blank range. Now, we've worked with several survivors. As we speak, there are only 3 survivors of Boko Haram who are in the U.S. That we know of, that we work with all of them. Who came to the U.S., but Habila has gone back. So Deborah and one other guy in Texas. The guy in Texas also has trauma to the head. He was shot in the head. Boko Haram killed his landlord. The next day they went for the funeral. They came to the funeral and shot everybody. And he's the sole survivor. And he was medevaced to the UK. The doctors worked on him for a couple of years. Finally, they said, there's nothing we can do for you. Let's send you to America. And so he came to the U.S. a few months ago. But he and Habila, they all have gunshots to the head. That's their MO when they do this. So it was very systematic in Yobe. And that's why the Yobe people fled inland to Plateau and the Middle Belt. Now, in Borno State, they have gone and they're attacking the rural communities very systematically too, and that's why they're fleeing into Cameroon. They're much poorer than the people of Yobe. Yobe could drive further inland within Nigeria and become IDPs, but the rural people in Borno literally they were run out of town, entire villages on foot across the border. So there is a level of systematic annihilation, but there are also sporadic, assassinations like this pastor who was an official of the Christian Association of Nigeria.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Brian, yeah.
Brian,
Oh,
I'm sorry.
we'll go to you.
I'm Brian Murphy, retired from the Department of State. Mr. Ogabe, what would you have, very sorry, what would you have the international community do that it has not been done so far, please, particularly the United States?
Well, the first recommendation was a change in the lens, the paradigm that they're using to look at this. This must be properly framed in the lens of global jihad, and then we can formulate appropriate responses. I think, for example, that we have had, the U.S. has had extensive experience dealing with insurgencies of this nature in Afghanistan and in Iraq. Let me point out that a U.S. terrorism report says that Boko Haram is the second deadliest terrorist group in the world, next to, guess who? The Taliban. So who has the best experience dealing with the Taliban? Guess who? The U.S. So, we can make this thing work. And so there needs to be some of that tactical intelligence cooperation that we are not sure and we have not seen much of. Again, the humanitarian response. I cannot emphasize this enough. When you have a country that is equally split, 50% Christian, 50% Muslim, if the Christians get really pushed to the wall, something will give. And that, for me, is the doomsday scenario that I dread. There has been an amazing reserve of grace and graciousness in taking it and taking it and taking it. But that reservoir is not inexhaustible. And when that dam bursts, we're talking a country of 150 million people, it will make Bosnia look like child's play. Now, one of the things we noticed while we're out there is that people who did not flee are being re-victimized again. I met a widow named Naomi, and Boko Haram came to her home. And again, this group is very resilient. They killed her husband in front of her, then they burnt her home right in front of her. So she had nowhere to go to. And she said to them, please kill me. She had an 8-month-old baby in her hand. She said, please kill me. You've destroyed my home. You killed my husband. And they said, oh, no, we don't kill women. And so she eventually went to live with her uncle. And then some months later, they came to her uncle's house and killed him again. Now, how she is not in a vegetative state, I don't know. But at some point, people like this will say, I can't take it anymore. And then that's where we're going to have a bigger problem. So I think that humanitarian assistance to the victims will help douse tensions. And that's one of the things we need to be looking at aggressively.
Okay, thank you. This lady and then over here.
So what is the status?
please
Oh,
identify-
sorry, Penny Starr with CNS News. You spoke about her difficulty getting a visa. What is in place now for people like Deborah and others who want to come to the United States? We talk about helping them there, or, I know, for example, in Afghanistan and Iraq, people were brought to the United States. What's in place to help people?
Well, I wish I could say that there was something in place, but even after Deborah was denied a visa multiple times, Habila, the sole survivor of a neighborhood massacre, was denied twice by the embassy. So we who are human rights advocates on behalf of these people, we end up spending so much time fighting the administration on issues like visas and all of that, that we actually cannot devote enough resources to the actual work of assisting these people. So after 3 tries, we got involved with a congressman. both Deborah and Habila, it took congressional interventions to be able to get them to come out to the States. Yeah.
One of the problems is that the State Department has been reluctant to even talk about this in terms of religious persecution. And in fact, I'm thinking back of the Assistant Secretary for Africa and his speech in 2012, where he said that this was a problem of poor delivery of government services. That's what was motivating Boko Haram. And there was poverty, and then the response of the U.S. was all economic at that time. And this was 2 years ago, and trying to develop the North. And that has been, I think, counterproductive in a way. And we've lost a decade. So, I mean, unless the analysis starts changing, the visas is going to be a continuing problem because they don't recognize it as a human rights crisis that it is. Maybe this incident with the Chibok girls will change that. And this man over here. And we'll go.
Jørgen Ullerup, Jyllands-Posten, Denmark. Deborah, I'd like to hear a little more about your story. Tell us about your family. What happened? Where was your mother? What happened to her? Do you have other sisters, brothers? And also, you said that you didn't play with the Muslim children. Is it very segregated in your town? I mean, are you divided up in two different communities?
No. Sorry. No, it's just that because my dad, we're together with my dad and with my brother. My dad always teach me that I should stay, he always told me not to follow bad friends and stuff. And anytime I'm with the Muslim kid, they always told me about that God is my God is fake and stuff. So I try to avoid them and stuff. So I don't talk to them anymore. And then when this happened, my mom traveled to Lagos, and then my brother is the only person I have, and so I don't have any sister or brother.
Did you have a question back there?
Michael Grybowski with the Christian Post. My question for the group is basically there have been, for years there have been atrocities in northern Nigeria, and I was curious, why do you believe that this particular incident, this mass abduction of schoolgirls, has garnered so much attention compared to other past incidents?
Well, maybe I should kind of follow up from where she left off. It's not so much the question of segregation between Christian communities and Muslim communities. Her case is really interesting because her mom was Muslim and her dad was Christian. It's one of those strange love stories that doesn't end very well. And so they got married, and then it became a problem. They were being persecuted. And so the mom had to actually move south just to avoid persecution. I should add here that after they killed her brother and her dad, they sat down and made a mental evaluation and said, oh, you know what, we got it wrong. She is the spawn of an apostate, so we should have killed her. So again, they revised their rules of engagement to make an exception that Deborah and her mom should be killed, and that's part of the reason why she's unsafe. But let me frame it this way. Persecution in northern Nigeria has been the new normal for decades. Every year, every couple of years, a Christian girl will be abducted and converted to Islam and married off, and her parents can do nothing about it. This is not terrorism. This happens every year. As a child, a friend of mine who was actually American, in Baptist high school and everything, they took her away and they married her off to someone, and they published newspaper headlines celebrating the fact that a top northern Christian, his daughter, had become a Muslim. I grew up with that as a child, and she's an American citizen. Now, what is happening now is this is persecution on steroids. Now, northern Nigerian Christians are used to being killed a couple of times a year. There's a lunar eclipse, and I'm not making this up, you can Google this. there will be a riot, churches will be burnt. It's the sins of the infidels that covered up the moon. This is normal in northern Nigeria. But for terrorists to come out and abduct 300 kids, this is where northern Nigerian Christians are saying, okay, we didn't sign up for this. We've been second-class citizens since we were born. Well, you can't kill us all the time. And this is why this is gaining a bit of international attention. The second reason is this. Frankly, the timing of this event. Remember that we as a world are going through the trauma of the loss of Malaysian Flight 370. We did all we could. We couldn't save those souls. Then we had the horrific incident with the ferry in Korea. This is the third traumatic experience that our collective humanity is facing. But unlike the other two, this is redeemable. There can still be hope. These girls can still be saved. And I think that we all are trying to say, look, what can we do to redeem this situation and save these girls' lives? So I don't want to psychoanalyze the globe, but I think that there's some element of hope within all of us that says maybe something good can come out of this.
Well, I also, want to add that, we abolished slavery about 150 years ago, and that has become the norm worldwide. And this was a really bold move of Boko Haram to say, no, we're going back to the bad old days, and these are our slaves, and we're going to sell them for $12 a piece. It just shocked the conscience of the world. I know moderate Muslims have stood up and in Nigeria, in southern Nigeria, and protested this. I know the Nigerian Muslim community here in Washington has protested it. And it's sort of caught on around the world. So it really is an escalation and something that is just so shocking that we can't turn away. Faith.
Hi, Faith McDonald from the Institute on Religion and Democracy. Emmanuel, you were talking about the fact that the northern Nigerian Christians have been treated as second-class citizens. And this kind of makes even clearer the cognitive dissonance that the State Department lives under, where they have said that it's the Muslims in northern Nigeria who are marginalized and impoverished, and that's why the poor things do what they do. Isn't it true that the State Department also has pressured the Nigerian government to actually share power with people who were not elected?
Yes, the U.S. has put a lot of pressure on the Nigerian government, and some of that pressure has been misleading and has misdirected the government of Nigeria. Now, at a time when the Nigerian government should have had a robust military response to the insurgency, the State Department was going, oh, this is economic, you need to appoint more Muslims into your cabinet, you need to throw more money at the problem, and so on and so forth. And it wasn't until the terrorists had captured significant swaths of territory, and some northern governors said, you got to help us out here, we're going under, that the Nigerian government realized that the U.S. had been misleading it and finally sent in the troops in May last year. And so, yes, we have seen some of that misguidance from the U.S. And we do need to, again, urge the U.S. to properly reevaluate, this situation. Let me tackle the poverty argument one more time. And here's the thing. Islam has some basic inbuilt safety nets for the poor with the system of zakat and alms giving. And Muslims are some of the most contented human beings that I have ever met. Their worldview of fatalism allows them to believe, if I'm not rich, it's God's will. And so they're not malcontents as the State Department is trying to portray. Now, I interviewed an American survivor of the UN bombing in Nigeria. And she said exactly the same words to me, that this is not economic because Muslims are not the average material, Western model. They don't operate that average material Western model. So yes, there does need to be a change in perspective in that light.
There was an unemployment issue among young men, though, in northern Nigeria, I think. It may have been exacerbated by the Boko Haram terrorism and ideology of being against education, too.
There is massive unemployment in northern Nigeria, and I will emphasize that we did have the Niger Delta militancy in the south. That was clearly economic in nature, clearly. What we have in the north is not the same. Secondly, I should point out that a lot of the unemployment in northern Nigeria is self-inflicted, in the sense that there is a warped theological practice that some say is not genuinely Islamic, where someone will have 40 kids, 4 wives and 40 kids, and then essentially dump them all on the streets in the hands of uncertified mullahs. It's called the Almajiri system. And so the northern Nigeria is intentionally growing street kids. We literally have farms producing unemployed and unemployable street kids. So where it happens, for example, in the southeast, DC here, for whatever reasons, in northern Nigeria, it's intentional. And there is a bill in the Nigerian Congress, they're trying to say, listen, send your kids to school. And, Muslims are up in arms against it. No, you can't force us. This is part of our religious practice. So it's actually hampering the ability of Nigeria's democracy to deal decisively with some of these problems. So the Almajiri system is not because there are no schools for them, but because they believe that they should leave their kids on the streets to learn Quranic instruction from this many times radical mullahs. And these kids have been used, they are the ones who are responsible for a lot of violence against Christians that is not even related to the terrorism. Yeah.
Well, I think that our time is up, and I want to thank you all for coming, and please express our thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.